great energy, never got sick, all these things that we look for. And then, I'm a researcher, and I started looking at keto as just as a modality for treating certain neurological diseases. And it occurred to me that keto might be just the next level stuff in human performance. And because even though I was fine where I wasn't feeling like I could, I'm always looking for the next thing in my life. I'm a performance chaser. So I thought, well, I'll just do a keto experiment, see what happens. And, I did 2 months of deep keto, and I felt great. I had more energy. I literally felt like I put on a little bit of muscle, which I thought was almost impossible when you're keto. Some of the lingering minor joint stuff went down even further, diminished even further. I found that I didn't need as much sleep at night to get the same quality of sleep. So it was compelling to me. So I decided to write a book about keto. And then as I got into the research writing the book, I realized keto is just a tool. It's calling upon human evolution. We only exist today because our ancestors 10,000, 50,000, a million years ago had access to keto. Keto is what kept us alive. It's this ability to take stored body fat and burn the fat in the muscles for real energy. But then because the brain typically wants glucose, and if you don't eat carbohydrates for 3 days or 4 days, there's no glucose available. But to be able to take some of the rest of the fat, send it to the liver and make ketones, which offsets the need for glucose. It's such an elegant system that we developed. It's why we live today. And yet most people never tap into that system. So I just thought by tapping into that system, I could increase my metabolic flexibility. And by that I mean the ability to extract energy from stored fat on my body, from fat on my plate, from glycogen in my muscles, from carbohydrates on my plate, from the ketones that my liver is making, and last, and hopefully least, from amino acids in the form of gluconeogenesis.
I'm just curious. You talked about how incredibly shredded and good-looking you are. What did it look like? What is your body comp when you're eating 1,000 grams of carbs a day?
So, because I was running 100 miles a week.
Just paper thin?
Yeah, it was. So I'm not a big guy, right? I'm 168 to 170 pounds on a good day.
Shredded.
If I've been in the gym with any regularity. So I raced at 30 pounds less than that.
Oh wow!
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
So I raced at 138 to 140.
Wow.
And by the way, at that weight, at 5'10", I was still a big marathoner.
Yeah.
I'm not big. I was probably 7-8 pounds more than I should have been. And yet the same body fat level. So you can imagine how much less muscle I had in those days. What happened to all those calories? A, they got burned by running. B, they got, and this is where it gets interesting, I think. This spontaneous thermogenesis. I just ran hot all the time to the extent that I would, sweat in my sleep in a cold room. So the body adjusts for excess calories by turning up the furnace. And that's not a good thing. So a lot of people
a lot of people would think that's a
bingo.
good thing. Right. So yeah,
no, that's exactly. Yeah. So people are kind of have these assumptions about how much food is an appropriate amount of food, right? And I think probably everybody that we know and everybody around tries to see what they can get away. What's the most amount of food I can get away with and not gain weight? What's the most amount of this dessert I can have and not feel like crap or whatever? So it's this mentality of I want to eat more. And, you go to the gym and you see people on the treadmill and they're doing 400, 500, 600 calories on the readout. And it's okay, what are you doing? You training for a 10K or a marathon? Oh, no, I just like to eat. So I'm going to the gym and I'm struggling and suffering and sweating and grunting and groaning, for 45 minutes so I can go back and have a few more bites of something I probably shouldn't have in the first place. So this mentality that we have about, how much food is appropriate to keep us going, it's based on this excessive consumption model, right, where we're trying to and so in the gym, people are trying to build a fast metabolism. Why? So they can eat more food. It's just ridiculous if you think about it. So the issue isn't, whether you can eat more food. The issue is, do you get hungry? Because if you don't get hungry, who cares if you eat more food? If you're not hungry, if you're finished eating and you're not hungry, and whether or not you finish what's on your plate, that's the issue is really what's the least amount of food I can eat, maintain muscle mass or gain muscle mass, maintain energy, never get sick, and most importantly, not be hungry. Because if I'm hungry, Everything falls out the window. But if I'm not hungry and I'm maintaining my mass, I'm actually a more efficient human being. So now we get back to longevity. And people are chasing a fast metabolism just because they want to be able to eat more food, or they think a fast metabolism is going to somehow help them, burn off extra calories. And in some cases it will, but there's a downside to that. And in the animal kingdom, animals that have the fastest metabolism live the shortest lifespans. And those that have a slower metabolism tend to live longer. So if you're if you're in this realm and you're trying to maximize longevity, you don't want to be chasing a fast metabolism. You actually want to be chasing, and this is in my estimation, some lowered metabolism, so you rev at a very low rate when you're resting, and you could go hard whenever you go hard, but there's no reason to go hard all the time every day, right?
I've heard you talk about some of your, like, when you say have like a piece of cheesecake, that you can take a bite of it, and you're like, that one bite was what I needed, and by the second bite, you're past the moment.
No,
of
or the
cheesecake.
fourth or fifth. I mean,
right.
But you're right. There's a diminishing return to, if you look at hedonistic tendencies, that first bite is freaking awesome almost every time, and then the second bite's like, oh, that's great. It's, almost as awesome. And the third, by the fourth or fifth bite, to quote, I think it was Winston Churchill, we've established what you are. Now we're just haggling over price. To see if we can finish the piece of cheesecake that the establishment served up as a, quote, serving, or that the hostess served up as a serving of dessert. And who's to say what a serving is? Maybe a serving is just 3 or 4 bites, or 4 or 5 bites, or 1 bite. But the point is, I'm not suggesting that people avoid those sort of hedonistic foods like cheesecake. I just happen to call it cheesecake because it's one of my favorite.
Yeah, I can't remember what other podcast I was listening to. You were talking in great detail about cheesecake.
Yeah, but I mean, my favorite experience for dessert ever was Cherry Garcia ice cream with creme de cassis on it. So just
I got the Cherry Garcia. What's the rest of that?
Creme de cassis is a liqueur that's made from berries.
There you go.
Yeah. And I would, there was a day when I would eat a half gallon of ice cream a day. There was a night. There was a time in my life, about 10 years, I would eat a half gallon of ice cream every day at the end of the day, every night. And if I didn't have any in the house and it was 10 o'clock at night, I'd go down to Thrifty's and buy a big brick of chocolate. So I had
sounds like my MMA fighting. You go home and just kill a pizza and some ice cream because you felt calorie low.
Yeah, but I mean that's the burden of a sugar burner where you've depleted all those carbohydrates. You're gonna have to go do it again tomorrow. You're not good at burning fat because you haven't done the work and you haven't adapted your diet to a fat adaptation modality, and so now you're just you're chained to the carbohydrate treadmill.
But all of this, in the actual food, like there's a progression of it. Now you have been, but with the Primal Kitchen and creating your own food, so it's much easier for people to find this stuff.
Nice segue. I love
that.
Yeah.
I got your game here. I know you got to be out of here in 20 minutes.
Mark slipped you a 20 before the show.
Yeah.
Keep it tight.
He invited me to speak on his panel here afterwards. You guys didn't know.
So one of the things that I've been involved in writing a lot about food and clean food on Mark's Daily Apple and in my books, and I'm trying to espouse this lifestyle where people are getting healthy fats and not trans fats and partially hydrogenated fats and oils, and cutting back on sugars and processed carbohydrates, and getting back to a real food diet. Well, it's hard sometimes to eat a real food diet on a hectic lifestyle that we have. What we do a lot on Mark's Daily Apple is we do a lot of recipes. And over the years, the recipes have involved sauces that are healthy sauces that use healthy oils and impart a not just better taste to the foods, but actually impart some functionality to the food. And I realized after banging my head against the wall for 10 years on Mark's Daily Apple that I was writing so much about food, and yet these foods didn't exist in the marketplace, the ones that I would buy myself. So I started creating healthy sauces, dressings, and toppings, the things that you could put on food that would impart great taste and then added functionality. And so literally, not only great taste, but the concept was the more you put on the food, the healthier the meal became. Yeah.